Zara's four arms moved in perfect harmony as she balanced the tray of glowing beverages, her purple skin shimmering under the restaurant's artificial lights. The Cosmic Cafe was the most popular dining establishment on Station Delta 7, serving creatures from across the galaxy. After 3 years working here, she thought she'd seen everything the universe had to offer. She was wrong. The human walked through the entrance like he owned the place, which immediately caught her attention. Most species entered the Cosmic Cafe with some degree of caution. The artificial gravity was set to accommodate various physiologies. The atmosphere was a carefully balanced mix of gases, and the temperature fluctuated to keep everyone comfortable. But this human just strolled in, completely unbothered. "Table for one," he said to Crix, the Valonian host, whose tentacles were already twitching with nervousness. Humans had only recently joined the Galactic Council, and most establishments were still figuring out how to serve them properly. Zara watched as Crix led the human to table 7 in her section. Great. She'd heard stories about humans from the other servers, most of them contradictory. Some said they were dangerous predators who could tear apart a Grakian with their bare hands. Others claimed they were fragile beings who needed constant climate control to survive. As she approached the table, the human looked up and smiled. The expression caught her off guard. Most species didn't show their teeth unless they were threatening someone, but this seemed genuinely friendly. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. "I'm Marcus. I just transferred here from Earth, and everyone keeps telling me I have to try the food at this place." "Welcome to the Cosmic Cafe," Zara replied, pulling out her datapad with one hand, while the other 3 continued to work efficiently. "I'm Zara, and I'll be your server today. Can I start you with something to drink?" Marcus glanced at the menu display hovering above the table. "What do you recommend? I'm still figuring out what my species can actually digest safely." That was refreshing. Most newcomers just pointed at random items and hoped for the best. "Well, the Andromedan fruit nectar is popular with carbon-based life forms. It's sweet and has a mild stimulant effect." "Sounds perfect. And could I get some water too?" Zara made a note. Water was simple enough. Most species could handle H2O in some form. "I'll be right back with those." As she walked toward the service station, she heard a soft thud from behind her. When she turned around, Marcus was on the floor, apparently having fallen out of his chair. Several other patrons were staring, and she could see the concern on their faces. Falls could be deadly for many species, especially if their internal organs were delicate. But Marcus was already pushing himself back up, laughing. "Sorry about that," he called out to the watching crowd. "Chair was slipperier than I thought." Zara hurried over, her medical training kicking in. "Are you injured? Do you need me to call the station medics?" Marcus looked genuinely confused. "Injured? From that little tumble? No, I'm fine." He hopped back into his chair with an ease that made Zara's head spin. "I've taken much worse falls just getting out of bed." She stared at him for a moment, processing what she'd just witnessed. The fall had been at least 2 feet onto a metal deck. The impact should have at least bruised his internal organs, if not broken something. Yet here he was, acting like nothing had happened. Are you certain you're not hurt?" she asked again. "Positive. Humans are pretty durable. We evolved on a world with higher gravity than this station, so we're built to take some punishment." Higher gravity. That explained the density she'd noticed in his bone structure, but still. "I'll get your drinks," she managed. When she returned with the nectar and water, Marcus was chatting easily with the crystalline couple at the neighboring table, apparently teaching them some kind of hand game that involved rapid finger movements. The crystallines were fascinated, their translucent bodies shimmering with excitement as they tried to copy his movements. "Here you are," Zara said, setting down the beverages. "Thanks." Marcus took a sip of the nectar and nodded approvingly. "This is great. Very smooth." Then he picked up the water glass and drained the entire thing in one long gulp. Zara's eyes widened. That had been a full liter of liquid, consumed in seconds. Most species sipped beverages slowly to avoid overwhelming their digestive systems. Would you like another water? If it's not too much trouble. I drink a lot of fluids throughout the day. She made another note on her pad, though her handwriting was getting a bit shaky. Are you ready to order, or do you need more time? Marcus scanned the menu again. I'm actually pretty hungry. What's your biggest entree? The Titan Feast, Zara replied automatically. It's designed to feed a family of 4 Grachians or 2 adult Thaxians. Perfect. I'll take that. Zara's stylus stopped moving. I'm sorry, did you say you want the Titan Feast? For yourself? Is that weird? I haven't eaten since yesterday morning, and I've got a long shift ahead of me. Since yesterday morning. Zara did some quick calculations in her head. That was nearly 30 hours without food. Most species needed to eat every 8 to 12 hours, or they'd start experiencing serious health problems. And now he was planning to consume enough food for 4 large carnivores. I'll put that order in right away, she said, backing away from the table. In the kitchen, Chef Borlak's 6 eyes all focused on her when she handed over the order slip. Is this a joke, Zara? One human ordered the Titan Feast? That's what he said. And Borlak? He just drank a liter of water in one gulp and fell 2 feet onto metal decking without getting hurt. The chef's chitinous shell clicked thoughtfully. I've heard stories about humans. Apparently, they're one of the few species that actively hunts for sport rather than just survival. That's just rumors, Zara protested, though she was beginning to wonder. Maybe, but I'm cooking the feast exactly as ordered. If the human can't finish it, that's not my problem. When Zara returned to check on Marcus while his food was being prepared, she found him doing something that made her freeze in place. He was stretching, extending his arms above his head, arching his back, rolling his shoulders. Simple movements, except that his joints were bending and rotating in ways that should have been impossible without causing severe damage. Excuse me, she said carefully, but what exactly are you doing? Just stretching. I've been sitting for a while. Marcus lowered his arms and rotated his neck in a complete circle. Several other patrons had stopped eating to stare. Humans need to move regularly or our muscles get stiff. His neck had just rotated 360 degrees. Is that normal for your species? Zara asked weakly. Pretty normal, yeah. We're not as flexible as some Earth animals, but we've got a decent range of motion. To demonstrate, he bent forward and touched his toes without getting out of his chair, then leaned back until his head was nearly upside down. A server from across the restaurant, Klex, who had tentacles instead of a spine, was watching with obvious horror. His species could bend and twist in amazing ways, but even he couldn't match what Marcus was doing with a rigid skeletal structure. Your food should be ready soon, Zara managed, backing away again. When she returned with the Titan Feast, a massive platter that usually required anti-gravity assist to carry, Marcus's eyes lit up. Now that looks fantastic. Thank you so much. Zara set the platter down with all 4 arms, the table creaking under the weight. The feast included 3 different types of protein, each from a different world, plus enough vegetables and grains to sustain a small family for days. Enjoy your meal, she said, expecting to return in an hour or so to box up the inevitable leftovers. She was serving other tables when she heard the shocked murmurs rippling through the restaurant. When she looked over at Marcus's table, the massive platter was completely empty. Not just mostly empty, there wasn't a scrap of food left anywhere. Marcus was leaning back in his chair, patting his stomach contentedly. That hit the spot, he said when she approached. Compliments to the chef. Everything was perfectly seasoned. Zara looked at the empty platter, then at Marcus, then back at the platter. You ate all of that? Well, yeah. I was pretty hungry. He paused, seeming to notice her expression. Is that unusual? I tried to pace myself. Pace himself. He had consumed enough food to feed 4 large carnivores, and he'd been pacing himself. Would you like dessert? She heard herself ask, though she wasn't sure why. Oh, babe, definitely. What do you recommend? By the time Marcus finished his 3rd dessert, a layered Andromedan honey cake that was supposed to be shared between 6 people, Zara had filled up 2 entire data pads with notes about human biology. Other servers had started gathering around her station, asking questions she couldn't answer. How many hearts does he have? Whispered Vex, a methane breather who had to wear a full environmental suit. I don't know, Zara replied, but his circulation seems incredibly efficient. He hasn't shown any signs of fatigue despite consuming enough calories to power a small transport. Maybe humans photosynthesize? Suggested Nilara, whose plant-like species absorbed energy directly from light. He's been sitting in the shade this whole time, Zara pointed out. When Marcus finally asked for his check, Zara brought it over with shaking hands. How was everything? Absolutely perfect. This place definitely lives up to its reputation. Marcus pulled out a credit chip and handed it to her. Keep the change. Zara looked at the chip's display and nearly dropped it. Marcus had tipped her more than she usually made in a week. This is too much, she stammered. Not at all. Great food, great service. I'll definitely be back. Marcus stood up and stretched again, his spine making a series of soft popping sounds that made several nearby diners flinch. Have a wonderful day, Zara. As he walked toward the exit, moving with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for a creature with rigid bones, Zara realized that everything she thought she knew about biology had just been turned upside down, and according to the shift schedule, Marcus worked in the station's engineering section, which meant she'd probably be seeing him again. Very soon. 3 days later, Zara was beginning to think her encounter with Marcus had been some kind of fever dream. She'd spent her off-shift time researching humans in the Galactic database, but the information was limited and contradictory. Some reports described them as fragile beings who needed constant environmental controls, while others painted them as nearly indestructible predators. She was wiping down tables in the morning when the door chimed, and Marcus walked in again. This time, he wasn't alone. "Good morning, Zara," he called out cheerfully, waving to her with one hand while the other guided what appeared to be a floating stretcher into the restaurant. Zara's hearts all skipped a beat simultaneously. The figure on the stretcher was clearly human. She was getting better at recognizing the species, but she was pale and connected to several medical devices. Her breathing was shallow, and monitoring equipment beeped steadily beside her. Is she dying?" Zara whispered, approaching cautiously. Marcus looked surprised. "Sarah? No, she's fine. She just had surgery yesterday and can't walk around yet, but she's been complaining about the hospital food, so I thought I'd bring her somewhere decent to eat." The woman on the stretcher opened her eyes and smiled weakly. "You must be Zara. Marcus hasn't stopped talking about this place." Her voice was soft but steady. "I'm Sarah Chen, Station Medical Officer." Zara stared between them, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "But she's injured. Shouldn't she be in a medical facility?" "The surgery was minor," Sarah explained, trying to prop herself up on her elbows. "They just had to remove my appendix." "Remove your what now?" Zara's voice pitched higher than she intended. "Appendix. It's a small organ that doesn't really do anything important anymore. Mine got infected, so they took it out." Sarah said this as casually as someone might discuss changing their clothes. Marcus was already arranging the floating stretcher next to one of the larger tables. "Humans have several redundant organs. We can lose quite a few pieces and still function normally." Redundant organs. Zara's species had exactly one of each vital organ, carefully protected and maintained. The idea of having extras that you could just remove was mind-boggling. What else is redundant? She found herself asking. Well, we have 2 kidneys but only need 1, Marcus said thoughtfully. 2 lungs, though losing one would slow us down quite a bit. We can survive without a spleen, a gallbladder, most of our liver. Most of your liver? Zara interrupted. The liver regenerates, Sarah added helpfully. You can remove up to 75% of it and it'll grow back. Zara sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Your organs regrow themselves? Some of them. Humans are pretty good at healing. We have to be. Our world is basically trying to kill us all the time. Before Zara could ask what that meant, the morning rush began. She forced herself to focus on her job, but she kept glancing over at the strange pair throughout her shift. Sarah remained on the stretcher, but sat upright, laughing and chatting with Marcus as they shared what appeared to be enough food for 6 people. During a brief lull, Zara couldn't help but approach their table. How are you feeling? She asked Sarah. Much better, thanks. The food here really is amazing. Sarah paused, studying Zara's expression. You seem worried. Is everything okay? Yesterday Marcus fell and wasn't hurt, and now you're sitting up and eating after surgery. Are all humans this durable? Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look. We're not unusually tough by Earth standards, Marcus said carefully. Earth is what we call a death world. The environment is pretty hostile, so we evolved to be resilient. Hostile how? Zara asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know. Well, the gravity is higher than most inhabited worlds, Sarah began. The weather can kill you in dozens of different ways. The planet is tectonically active, so the ground literally moves and shakes. There are massive storms that can level cities. The sun bombards everything with radiation. The animals, Marcus added. Almost everything on Earth either wants to eat you, inject you with venom, or both. Even the plants can kill you, Sarah continued. Some of them are poisonous to touch. Others explode when they reproduce, shooting seeds like bullets. Zara felt faint. And humans? Live there? On purpose? It's home, Marcus said with a shrug. You adapt. Human children learn to avoid dangerous plants before they can walk properly. We develop immunity to most local toxins during childhood. Our bones are dense enough to handle impacts that would shatter other species. The planet tries to kill us, so we get stronger, Sarah summarized. It's been going on for millions of years. Their casual attitude about living on a world that sounded like a nightmare was almost as disturbing as the details themselves. Zara excused herself to help other customers, but her mind kept wandering back to their conversation. The lunch rush brought its own surprises. Marcus ordered his usual enormous meal, but Sarah, despite being injured and supposedly recovering from surgery, ate nearly as much. When Zara commented on their appetites, Sarah laughed. Humans burn a lot of calories just maintaining our body temperature and keeping our organs running. We need about twice as much food per body weight as most species. Our metabolism is designed for a high-energy lifestyle, Marcus added. We're persistence hunters. What does that mean? Zara asked, though she was starting to dread the answer. On Earth, humans hunt by chasing prey until it collapses from exhaustion, Sarah explained. We can run for hours without stopping. Most animals are faster than us in short bursts, but we just keep coming. Eventually, they get tired, but we don't. The image of humans relentlessly pursuing their prey across vast distances was terrifying. Zara had seen Marcus move. That fluid, efficient gait made perfect sense now. He wasn't just walking, he was conserving energy for a marathon chase. How far can you run? She asked weakly. Marcus considered this. Well, The Galactic Standard Marathon is about 42 kilometers, right? Most trained humans can complete that. Some of us run ultra-marathons, 100-kilometer races or longer. The longest verified run by a human was just over 5,000 kilometers, Sarah added helpfully. Took him about 3 months, but he did it. 5,000 kilometers. That was farther than many species could travel in their entire lifetimes. As if reading her thoughts, Marcus smiled. Don't worry, we're not planning to chase anyone around the station. Modern humans rarely need to persistence hunt anymore. Rarely, Zara squeaked. Well, sometimes for sport, Sarah said. Or if you're stranded on a planet without technology. The afternoon brought even more revelations. Zara watched Marcus casually lift and rearrange furniture that should have required mechanical assistance. When she asked about it, he demonstrated by picking up her serving tray, loaded with dishes for 4 tables, and holding it steady with one hand. Earth gravity is about twice what you have here on the station, he explained, so everything feels lighter to us. It's like the opposite of wearing a weighted vest. Are there any physical limitations humans have? Zara asked desperately. Anything you can't do that other species can? Marcus and Sarah looked at each other thoughtfully. We're not very good at breathing underwater, Sarah offered. But we can hold our breath for several minutes, Marcus added. Some humans can go 15 minutes without breathing. We can't see in complete darkness, Sarah continued. But our night vision is better than most species. We evolved as hunters, so we needed to see in low light. We're not very flexible compared to species without rigid skeletons, Marcus said. But we can dislocate our joints and pop them back into place if we need to fit through tight spaces, Sarah countered. Zara put her head in her hands. Every limitation they mentioned seemed to come with a terrifying counterpoint. The final straw came when Sarah decided she was feeling well enough to walk. She disconnected herself from the monitoring equipment, swung her legs off the stretcher, and stood up. Less than 24 hours after surgery. The doctor said light movement would actually help with recovery, she explained, noticing Zara's horrified expression. Human healing is faster when we stay active. She walked slowly around the restaurant, Marcus hovering protectively nearby, chatting with other customers and complimenting the decor. Her movements were careful but steady, showing no signs of the weakness Zara would have expected. When they finally left, Sarah walked out under her own power while Marcus carried the medical equipment. See you tomorrow, Marcus called out cheerfully. Zara waved back automatically, then sank into the nearest chair. Tomorrow? He was coming back tomorrow? She looked around the restaurant at the other servers, all of whom had been watching the humans with the same mixture of fascination and terror she felt. In the kitchen, she could see Chef Borlak updating his notes on human dietary requirements. 3 days ago, her biggest concern had been remembering which species couldn't eat sulfur-based proteins. Now she was working in a restaurant that apparently catered to apex predators from a death world who could regrow their organs and chase prey across continents. And according to the station manifest, there were 12 more humans scheduled to arrive next week. Zara reached for her datapad and began updating her notes. If she was going to serve these terrifying beings on a regular basis, she needed to understand them better, even if the knowledge gave her nightmares. 2 weeks had passed since Zara's first encounter with Marcus, and the Cosmic Cafe had become the unofficial gathering spot for every human on Station Delta 7. What started as one curious human had grown into a regular crowd of 12, with more arriving each day as word spread through the galactic fleet. Zara had gotten used to serving beings who could eat enough food to feed a small army, but she was still learning new things about human biology that defied everything she thought she knew about life. Today's revelation came during the lunch rush when she witnessed something that made her question reality itself. Engineer Third Class Jamie Rodriguez was sitting at table 12, peacefully eating what she had come to know as a normal human meal, enough protein to sustain a Thaxian family for 3 days. When the accident happened, the atmospheric recycling system hiccuped, causing a brief pressure fluctuation that shattered several glass containers in the kitchen. A razor-sharp fragment flew across the dining area and sliced directly across Jamie's forearm, opening a cut that should have required immediate medical attention. Blood welled up from the wound, bright red against her brown skin. Zara dropped her tray and rushed toward the emergency medical kit, already calculating how long it would take for the station medics to arrive. But when she looked back at Jamie, the human was simply pressing a napkin against the cut and continuing to eat. "Shouldn't you get medical attention?" Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jamie looked down at her arm as if just noticing the injury. "Nah, it's just a scratch. It'll stop bleeding in a minute." But you're losing blood," Zara protested. "Humans have about 5 liters of blood," Jamie explained casually, dabbing at the wound. "I can lose up to a liter and still function normally. This is maybe a few milliliters." As Zara watched in fascination and horror, the bleeding began to slow. Within 10 minutes, it had stopped completely. By the end of Jamie's meal, the wound was already beginning to close. "How?" Zara managed. "Platelets," Jamie said, as if that explained everything. "Our blood clots pretty quickly to prevent infection and blood loss. Comes in handy when you're constantly getting injured." "Constantly getting injured?" Zara echoed weakly. "Well, yeah. Humans are basically accident-prone. We're curious. We take risks. We get hurt. Our bodies are designed to deal with it." Jamie rolled up her sleeves, revealing a collection of scars in various stages of fading. "See? This one's from when I fell off a ladder last month. This burn is from a plasma conduit that was hotter than I thought. And this one..." She pointed to a long mark across her palm. "That's from when I was 8, and decided to see how sharp my father's tools were." Each scar told a story of injury that would have been debilitating or fatal to most species, treated as minor inconveniences by humans. "Your species catalogs injuries?" Zara asked, fascinated despite herself. "We kind of have to. Human children are basically tiny suicide machines. They have no sense of danger and unlimited curiosity. Parents learn to patch them up quickly." The conversation was interrupted by Marcus arriving for his daily lunch, but today he wasn't alone. He was carrying what appeared to be an unconscious human over his shoulder like a sack of cargo. "Hey, Zara," he called out cheerfully, as if carrying unconscious bodies was perfectly normal. "Table for 2, please. Alex here had a little too much fun at the 0G recreation facility." Zara stared as Marcus deposited the apparently lifeless human, Alex, into a chair. Is he dead?" Marcus laughed. "Dead? No, he's just sleeping off a concussion. He crashed into a wall at about 30 kilometers per hour during a 0G race." 30 kilometers per hour, Zara repeated slowly. "Into a wall. Yeah, it was pretty spectacular. He'll be fine, though. Humans have thick skulls for a reason." As if summoned by their conversation, Alex stirred and opened his eyes. "Did I win?" he asked groggily. "You came in second," Marcus told him, "but only because you knocked yourself out 3 meters from the finish line." "Worth it," Alex mumbled, then looked around the restaurant. "Oh, good. We're at the food place. I'm starving." Zara watched in stunned silence as Alex, who had apparently suffered a brain injury severe enough to cause unconsciousness, ordered and consumed a full meal as if nothing had happened. When she asked how he was feeling, he shrugged. "Bit of a headache, but that's normal after a good crash. I've had worse." "You've had worse than a 30-kilometer-per-hour impact to the head?" Zara asked. "Oh, definitely. This one time on Mars, I fell into a canyon. That was about 50 meters down onto solid rock. Broke 3 ribs and a collarbone, but the view was amazing." The casual way Alex described what should have been a fatal accident made Zara's head spin. She excused herself to process orders in the kitchen, where Chef Borlak was preparing what had become known as human portions. "They're getting stranger every day," the chef muttered, his 6 eyes all focused on different tasks. "Now they're coming in half dead and ordering extra food to fuel the healing process." "I'm starting to think they're not actually a biological species," Zara said. "Maybe they're some kind of military androids designed to look organic?" "That would explain a lot," agreed Klex, who was preparing a tray of beverages. "No natural creature should be able to function after the things they do to themselves." Their speculation was interrupted by shouting from the dining area. Zara rushed out to see what new crisis had developed, only to find Marcus and Alex engaged in what appeared to be some kind of violent ritual. They were seated across from each other, arms locked together on the table, faces red with exertion. Other customers had backed away, clearly expecting bloodshed. "What are you doing?" Zara called out. "Arm wrestling," Marcus grunted. "Trying to settle who pays for lunch." Arm wrestling. They were voluntarily straining their muscles to the breaking point as a form of entertainment. The match continued for several minutes, both humans putting enormous effort into what seemed like an attempt to break each other's arms. Finally, Alex's hand slammed down onto the table with a sound like a gunshot. "Good match," Alex said, rubbing his shoulder. "You've been working out." "You too," Marcus replied, flexing his fingers. "I think you almost dislocated my wrist there." They spoke about potential injury as if it were a compliment. The afternoon brought yet another revelation when Dr. Sarah Chen arrived for her daily check-in meal. She had returned to full duty just 3 days after her surgery, but Zara noticed she was moving more carefully than usual. "Everything okay?" Zara asked as she took Sarah's order. "Just tired," Sarah replied. "I've been pulling double shifts in the medical bay. The station commander wants detailed physiological reports on all the humans, so I've been running tests on myself and the others." "How many hours have you been working?" Zara asked. "This week? About 90 hours, I think. Maybe 95. 95 hours in a week. That was more than most species could work in a month without suffering serious health consequences." "When did you last sleep?" Zara asked. "I got 3 hours yesterday, and maybe 4 the day before." Sarah said this as if it were a reasonable amount of rest. 3 hours? Total? Humans can function on very little sleep when necessary. During emergencies, we can stay awake for days if we have to. I once worked for 68 hours straight during a crisis on Luna Colony. 68 hours, without sleep, while performing medical procedures. "How are you still alive?" Zara asked in genuine wonder. "Caffeine helps," Sarah admitted. "And adrenaline. When humans are under stress, our bodies produce chemicals that override normal fatigue. We can push far beyond our normal limits when lives are at stake." As if to demonstrate, Sarah's personal communicator chimed with an emergency alert. She immediately stood up, all signs of tiredness vanishing as her posture straightened and her eyes became alert. "Medical emergency in Engineering Bay 7, she announced. "I have to go." Zara watched as Sarah transformed from an exhausted, recently injured woman into a focused medical professional and sprinted out of the restaurant at a speed that would have challenged most species at full rest. 20 minutes later, she was back. "How did you—" Zara began. "Chemical leak," Sarah explained, sitting back down and resuming her meal as if nothing had happened. 3 injured Voltarians. Basic decontamination and treatment for acid burns. They'll be fine." She had diagnosed, treated, and saved 3 lives in the time it usually took Zara to prepare a complex order. As the day wound down, Zara found herself observing the humans with a mixture of awe and terror that had only grown stronger over the past 2 weeks. They ate like armies, healed from injuries that should have been fatal, worked impossible hours without rest, and treated potentially deadly situations as minor inconveniences. But what struck her most was how utterly normal they seemed to consider all of this. Marcus was telling a story about his childhood pet, apparently a dog, which was a predatory pack animal that humans kept in their homes for companionship. Alex was explaining the rules of a sport called rugby, which seemed to involve deliberately running into other humans as hard as possible. Sarah was reviewing medical reports while simultaneously eating enough food to sustain most beings for days. "Zara," Marcus called out as the group prepared to leave, "we're organizing a little gathering this weekend. Nothing fancy, just some human games and food from Earth. Would you like to join us?" The invitation was clearly genuine and friendly, but Zara felt a chill of terror. Human games. She had learned enough about human games to know they usually involved competition, physical contact, and acceptable levels of injury. That's very kind," she managed. "But I should probably work." "Suit yourself," Marcus said with a smile. "But you're welcome any time. We love sharing our culture." As the humans left, chatting and laughing among themselves, Zara slumped into a chair and reached for her datapad. Her notes on human biology had grown to over 300 pages, and she was nowhere near understanding these beings. She had started this job thinking she was serving food to travelers from across the galaxy. Instead, she had discovered she was working at the preferred dining establishment for indestructible apex predators who had somehow evolved both the ability to kill most things they encountered and the social skills to be genuinely pleasant dinner companions. Tomorrow, according to the station manifest, 20 more humans were scheduled to arrive. Zara updated her notes, took a deep breath, and began preparing for another day of serving the most terrifying and inexplicable species she had ever encountered. At least the tips were good.